Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to moderate this panel on propelling the Make in India engine, and we'll focus on three specific enablers for that. But before we do that, I want to invite the panelists onto the stage. As Ms. Vasanthi mentioned, we have excellent representation from some of the key states who are very active in this program. So it's my honor to invite the panelists onto the stage. Shri Jayesh Ranjan, IAS Secretary, Information Technology from Government of Telangana. Thank you very much. I next invite Shri Pradeep Jaina, IAS Principal Secretary, Electronics and IT Department from Government of Odisha. Thank you, sir. Finally, on behalf of the Government of Kerala, the IT and Industries Department, we have a person who, from the entrepreneurial side of what we are going to talk about, Dr. Jayashankar Prasad, who is the CEO for the Kerala Startup Mission. So I invite him onto the stage. Thank you very much. So what we'll do is we have about 55 minutes or so. I'll spend just a few minutes to set the stage with a few key slides. Then we'll open it up. We'll spend the majority of time hearing from the panelists here. Each of them will make a few opening comments. And then the last 30 minutes or so we'll spend with a few of the questions that I had. We'll also try to reserve some time for questions from the audience. So we are here to talk about Make in India and We are here to talk about Make in India and specifically in the high-value manufacturing. Especially, we are all here talking about the electronics and semiconductor ecosystem. The Make in India program, which kind of got kicked off in 15, 16 months back, has had quite a bit of initial success both here as well as globally. But clearly, a lot more needs to be done. While there's been good progress, I think some of the initial changes or progress has not quite been what at least the folks from industry and others have really wanted. So in our mind, there are three key enablers that we really need to see this get accelerated, which is the high-value manufacturing, we need the skilled workforce, and finally, we need some entrepreneurship in the hardware sector itself. We certainly have the foundation for these three pillars. If you see at the bottom of this, the domestic demand has been there, is there, and despite some of the global uncertainties we hear of, at least from an India demand perspective for electronics and semiconductors, that's definitely there, the 400 billion number that we hear. So we do have the foundation for this. We have the key stakeholders, the industry, the government, and the academia, right? They've all been active in looking at this one. So while there is more that needs to happen with each of these stakeholders, they've certainly been a very active participant to make this engine go forward. And what they're all doing is, putting together the right policies and the infrastructure. So in our view, with the foundational elements in place and strengthening with active push from all the stakeholders, with these three enablers that we laid out here, we will see the vision for this Make in India for our electronics and semiconductor segment materialize. But then we really need to look at each of these pillars to see what is working and what the key gaps are. So I'll spend one slide each on each of these three pillars that you see here. If you look at the manufacturing itself, we have these aggressive goals of manufacturing to contribute a quarter of our GDP in the next 7-8 years. A quarter of our GDP roughly means about, to grow from where we are, today you are at 13% or so, so to have an additional 12%, we have to add about 400, 500 billion from the manufacturing segment itself, right? And these are pretty big numbers. And for us to be able to hit that, we have to have the high value manufacturing here, right? And by high value manufacturing, what we mean is the activity which really has the margins in it, which demonstrates the high profitability, which also spurs the ecosystem, right? It has a certain supply chain associated with it. It has a certain R&D and research associated with it. And And it's also something which strengthens the strategic plans of the nation itself. So it should be of high strategic importance. So if these three criteria are met in terms of profitability, enabling an ecosystem, and strengthening our country's strategic plans, then we think that's a high-value manufacturing for us. And we certainly need this. And right now, it certainly needs a boost if you look at what has been happening and where the gaps have been. So we'll be eager to hear from the panelists on what their views are on to make this happen. So moving on, the second pillar was really about the skilled workforce. We know that if manufacturing has to hit a quarter of our GDP, the jobs will come. It's expected that it will create about an additional 100 million jobs in the country. But the key thing to understand is what are the kind of jobs that will be created, and are we ready for it? If you look at what other nations have done, the East Asian nations, which in the last 20, 30 years, they have planned for this before actually the manufacturing and the maturity happened. So it behooves on all of us here to really think about, are we ready with this kind of manpower? What are the skills that are needed? Do they have the right kind of education? Do they have the vocational training? How can they really be productive? To compete in the world, how do you have the labor productivity with this workforce? So I think we have a challenge here that needs to be tackled as well, so that we are ready when this manufacturing really kicks off. Finally, if you look at the third pillar, the entrepreneurship in this space, there's been a lot of buzz on startups in India with several events in there. And I think it has overtaken Israel recently. We are now third in the world in terms of the overall startup ecosystem behind US and UK. But if you look at, and you see some of the numbers here on how much funding has gone into it and what the growth has been. But if you look at where the startup, what space they are in, a majority of it are in the e-commerce and those spaces. We need those as well. There's nothing wrong with those. Those are really making our life remarkably different. But if you look at the far right of it, the number of startups in the hardware manufacturing ecosystem has been really paltry. So this is one of the pillars where we are clearly behind when we look at it from the ESA point of view. So just to summarize this, we need the high-value manufacturing, needs a kick and a boost for that. We need the right kind of skilled workforce. And finally, the entrepreneurship and the startup ecosystem in this space needs to kickstart as well. And each of these stakeholders, the industry, government, and the academia, have a role to play in it, right? The industry has to think long-term. It's not just about a 2 to 3 year return or hitting cash flows right away off the start. The industry has to think long-term and invest in the right kind of R&D for this. And the government still has to push along in the ease of doing business. That is one area which kind of stands out as where we are still not really doing well in the last 14, 15 months. And the academia has a big role to play in training the workforce that we have. So with this as the background, let me transition over to our panelists. I'll request each of them to make a few opening comments, and then we'll go to the questions itself. So first, I want to invite Sri Jayesh Ranjan from Government of Telangana to make a few opening comments.
Thank you very much, Srinivas. Good afternoon, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Many of you would be aware that while national campaigns like Make in India, Digital India, Startup India, Skill India, all that is happening, but the real action today is in the states. And of the 29 states in the country, you can maybe count 8 to 10 states as being in the forefront of these kind of programs. And of course, some of us are here. A few more are there who are not on the dais, but we need to recognize them as well. So these are the 8 to 10 states which are really pushing the boundaries, and each of the state offers something very innovative, very unique. I would like to share with you that Telangana, which is the 29th and the newest state in the country, values electronic manufacturing, electronic design as a very, very key priority area in our overall economic development plans. And our policies, our approach, our action on the ground in the last year and a half has really given us some very, very encouraging initial results. And I'll very quickly share what we have done, and then if there are any specific issues that we would like to clarify or you want to seek more information about, I'll be very happy to address that. Now, electronic manufacturing is focused around Hyderabad, which is the capital city of Telangana, the jewel in our crown, so to say. The electronic manufacturing park, the clusters, is more than 1,000 acres, and I'm very happy to inform that the electronic manufacturing cluster is practically a part of Hyderabad city. You step off the airport and you enter into the electronic manufacturing park. This is something which is of very unique advantage which Hyderabad can offer, because if you try to locate your manufacturing elsewhere, for instance, any other state, typically you are shown locations or parks which are 100 kilometers away from the city, 500 kilometers away from the city, and so on. So the advantage of Hyderabad is that you can locate your manufacturing practically within the city, and obviously it means that all your executives, your employees, they can live in a very livable city. Hyderabad, many of you would be aware, has been consistently rated as the best city to live in terms of quality of living, and Mercer does this annual ranking of Indian cities. So for the last 3 years, Hyderabad is rated number 1. Not to run down any other city, but there are obvious advantages of good quality infrastructure and at a very, very reasonable price. I mean, since we are in Bangalore, I can always use this as a comparison that you can get thrice the infrastructure of Bangalore in Hyderabad at 1/3 the prices. So, but again, as I said, it doesn't mean that I'm trying to run down Bangalore, but that is how the reality is. The other important point is that Srinivas mentioned about ease of doing business. I would like to share with you that Telangana today is the only state in the country which has done away with the requirement of prior permissions and approvals. You do not need any approvals, any permissions to start your business. Other states are still talking about simplifying their procedures, making it online, monitoring it closely, putting some nodal officer. But we as a state have done something very kind of unbelievable, which is to do away with the requirements of permissions. You don't need anyone's permission. You just apply for a piece of land, give a self-certificate that you will comply with all the laws of the land, and you just start your construction from the very next day onwards. So this is something which again is very unique, and I must tell you that in the last year and a half, close to 1,000 plus approvals have been given in all across sectors, not just in electronic manufacturing, but the entire range of industrial manufacturing. 1,030 approvals have been given till yesterday, following this principle of no prior approval required. Self-certification is enough, and when you start commercial production, only then you need approvals, which also will be delivered to you in a 15-day period. And if you fail to deliver it in the 15th day, then on the 16th day it is deemed to be approved, and the person who is responsible for delaying your approvals is actually penalized for the number of days he has delayed it. Every day he is penalized 1,000 rupees, and that is given to you. So basically what I want to say is that giving 1,000 rupees is no big deal. I mean, it's peanuts, but it sets very high levels of accountability. See, there is no state government today which says that if I default, I give you a right to sue me, which we do. And this is something which is a part of our legislation. It is not a government order which can be tomorrow overturned or thrown away. So in fact, the very first act which the new government of Telangana passed in their assembly was this act, which is called TS iPass. Since skilling